are now listening to the IELTS podcast. Learn from tutors and ex-examiners who are masters of IELTS preparation. Your host, Ben Worthington.
This podcast gets published internationally in China, in the US, in Mexico, in Italy, South America, South Africa. Are you ready for global stardom?
It sounds wonderful. Yes, I am.
All right, fantastic. Hello there, IELTS students. In this episode, we're going to talk with a very smart student called Lena. And Lena took the IELTS exam and she's got an interesting story to share. So, welcome to the podcast, Lena.
Hi.
Hi there. So can you just give us like an overview of like who you are, where you're from, what you do? Just to get us started.
It sounds like the first question in IELTS speaking part, you know.
Yeah, I'll give you an IELTS score at the end as well.
My name is Lena. I'm from Moscow. It's in Russia. And actually, I'm a news correspondent at an online newspaper. I don't work with the English language every day, but a couple of months ago, I decided to take the exam because I'm thinking about entering a German university, and I need some courses in German universities in English, and I need this certificate to prove that my knowledge is okay to cope with them. And I realized that I had to take the exam, and I think that in winter I started preparing for IELTS, and I used different materials and new podcasts as well. It was my first attempt. I've never done IELTS before, and it was successful, so I'm very glad.
That is fantastic. And so you passed, you got the grades you wanted first time.
Yeah, quite right.
Super. Just a question slightly off topic, but is it a good time to be a news correspondent at the moment in Russia, just generally speaking?
It's a bad time to be a journalist in Russia, to be honest. But nevertheless, there are few newspapers, high-quality papers, and it's a pleasure for journalists to work there. For instance, Kommersant. And if people have this opportunity, they are lucky. I don't have this opportunity right now, but you never know, maybe in several months.
Okay, just another topic, and then this is actually related to IELTS, this question. Would you say that your sort of like industry-specific knowledge, i.e. journalism and news and international news, would you say that was beneficial for maybe IELTS writing task 2?
Well, it's possible to say so, but it's also important that I have a very good education. Actually, my university, I'm actually a linguist and a teacher, and I have a very good education. And when I was a student, we covered a lot of different topics, and we had some subjects like the language of mass media, and that's why the topics in IELTS essays, for instance, they were familiar to me in a way.
I see. Yeah, because I thought that maybe from journalism and covering different stories, you'll probably have an above a higher than average knowledge of certain different topics, like internationally, compared to somebody who just studies, I don't know, maybe art, or somebody who just studies biology, because it's quite global, isn't it, I imagine?
Yes, on one hand, you are quite right, but as I work only with news, I don't have the opportunity to go into depth. And for some topics, you need more specific knowledge.
I see. I will go in a bit off topic related to like the questions I've got in front of me, because I've got some set questions, because I just want to dive into this because I find it quite interesting. So
Okay.
you found that you just said that for it gives you sort of like a good overall idea, but for some topics it doesn't go into depth. Is that right? That yeah?
Yeah, for instance, I can give you an example. In one of the podcasts, you discussed the topic of international marketing. And when I heard about it, I was shocked and terrified because, to be honest, I have no idea what it is. And in the exam, it would be a disaster.
Right. Yeah. This is it. There's a lot of this is what I've said like quite a few times before, that it's not only going to test your language, it's going to, especially task 2, it's going to test your knowledge of international events and certain topics, and sometimes it can be a little bit detailed and be demanding more detail and more knowledge than you'd possibly expect. So what I wanted to ask you, Lena, was how did you deal with this? How did you get into depth? How did you discover your weaknesses, and then how did you solve it with regards to certain topics?
Well, I believe that first of all, I listened to BBC World News Service every day, and they have 2 programs a day. Each lasts for 30 minutes, I think, and they cover a lot of topics. And also I used this program 6 Minute English. I downloaded programs for several years, and I listened to them every day as well. And also I had a textbook. I used the textbook, and I would highly recommend it. It's called New Insights into IELTS. They have a workbook, student's book and workbook, and they cover a lot of topics. And they give a lot of examples and a lot of then I realized that I had more difficulties with writing and with speaking, and that's why I downloaded 2 additional textbooks and worked them through as well.
Right. Interesting. Very good. Very good in overview there. This book, New Insights into IELTS, it helped you because it gave you some ideas for different topics, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. They have different texts and different topics, and they give you essay samples. It's very useful.
Interesting. And there was another point that you mentioned. You liked it for 2 reasons. One, because of the topics and the ideas, and and then the second, did you say that it gives you lots of tips as well? Is that right?
Yes. And they don't. They do it step by step, so to speak. Not just to give you a task and you can cope with it as you will. No, they explain how to do it, and when you follow the instruction, then at some point you realize that you know very well what to do, and you can do it quickly.
Interesting. Very good. All right. So now, what was your you said before that your biggest challenge was, did you say the writing and the speaking? Is that right?
Yes, but I had more difficulties with writing, actually. I was afraid. And I know that a lot of things depend on your topic, and I was afraid that I get something like international marketing. And besides, some of your students in podcasts advised to write every day, and I intended to do so, but unfortunately I work and study, and I didn't have enough time for it every day, and that's why I knew that I wasn't well prepared for the exam.
Well, there's two things I want to say there. The first one, like, I mean, just from personal experience, like, we all do this sort of like set good intentions. For example, really, yeah. Like in your case, I'm going to write an essay every day, and I think everybody, a lot of people, especially the ambitious ones, action takers, a lot of us, we set these ambitions, and they're quite high, they're quite lofty, and then we beat ourselves up for not. Well, we can beat ourselves up for not attaining these lofty ambitions or these rules or these intentions. And I'm speaking from like personal experience because I set quite high goals for myself, and not always do I manage to reach them. I'll give you an example. Like, I'm trying to give up caffeine at the moment, and I was beating myself up the other day because I'd fallen back into drinking coffee. And it sounds kind of ridiculous, but my friend, he said, look, I mean, you're wiser now, and when you try and give up the next time, you'll know what to expect, and this time you got further than you did before, because before I could only last maybe like 3 or 4 days, but this time I lasted a good 2 weeks, and I just got further. So what I wanted to say is, like, we should still carry on trying, and we should still set these intentions and still keep at it, because even if we fail, we're still closer than we were before, just because we set this intention. So I just wanted to share that. And then the second point that I wanted to ask you was, how did you discover that writing was your weak point?
I believe that I've always known it because my first foreign language is German, and the spelling in both languages is different. And that's why from the very beginning, when I learned English at university, I had more problems with writing than with anything else. So
I see. How did you solve your challenges with writing? With spelling, sorry.
I wrote these sample essays when I had time. For instance, at university, when the lectures were boring, I just copied them, and in this way I found out some new words and the spelling of them. And when I corrected my essays myself, and when I found some mistakes, I made myself write this word, for instance, several lines to memorize it, and so on.
I see. The old school method of just writing it just time and time again. Yeah. Yeah, I've done the same. I used to have lists of Spanish words and lists of English words, and I would translate them back and forth, and not only to improve my vocabulary, but also to learn the spelling, But also, there's so many apps available nowadays that can help you improve your spelling. So, yeah. So, Lena, why did you decide? Because you got the scores that you wanted, and yeah, obviously, because that's why we're on the call now. But what made you decide to join the course and start working with us? What made you decide to join the online IELTS course?
Well, when I learned about the podcast on the internet, I wanted to listen to it to understand what information I could learn. And when I listened to one of the podcasts, I realized that it was very useful. and after listening to it, the examination didn't seem to be so frightening, and I just wanted to find out more, and that's why I began to listen to podcasts, I believe 3 times a week when I cleaned my flat or something. And some of the podcasts were really useful. For example, the podcast when you discuss this essay for Band 9. To be honest, I just learned this essay by heart, and these constructions in the exam.
Genius, absolute genius, Lena. That is fantastic. And and what did you like about the course the most, or what do you think helped you the most?
First of all, of course, feedbacks of other students, because they are very motivating. And when I listened to them, I realized that I could do the same myself. And of course, the discussion of tasks which came into real exam are also very useful, because when you discuss it and give some ideas how to answer different questions and which constructions to use, somehow it helps, and I could recall it afterwards when I started doing these tasks myself.
Excellent. Just a question popped back into my mind with regards to the preparation. You said that you had an issue with like one of the topics, which was like international marketing. How did you solve that specific problem with international marketing, for example?
I didn't solve it. I just hoped I wanted to get this topic in the exam. And of course, I looked on the internet what international marketing was, just to have at least a slight idea of what it is. But to be honest, I just didn't have enough time to prepare for something like this properly, and I just hoped that I would be lucky.
Okay.
It's a bad way, but I had nothing to do.
No problem. Maybe I will edit this part out of the podcast. No, I'm just joking. But Lena, what question did you get on exam day? Can you remember?
Yes, it was very easy. It was something like some teacher and parents believe that they should supervise their children. Others think that they don't. Discuss both views and tell us about your own opinion.
Fantastic. And just by the way, do you remember if you did task 2 first or task 1?
I did task 1 first and then task 2. And in task 1, I had a scheme to describe some changes in the park environment or something like this. It was very easy because actually I expected to have a graph, a line graph or something, or a diagram there.
Interesting. And what happened with the speaking?
With the speaking, I actually did the speaking part the day before. It was quite easy because the examiner was very friendly. He asked me some questions about my work, but the main topic was about lies and telling people lies and find out the truth, something like this.
Interesting. It's good that you had a friendly examiner. I like it when I hear about these kind of stories. And by
the way, I just remembered, I considered him to be from the Great Britain because he had such a wonderful accent. And it was a pleasure to talk to him. But afterwards, I got acquainted with some people, and one of them knew that examiner, and he told me that actually he was from the Czech Republic. And it was wonderful because I could never tell that he was not from Britain, you know?
Wow, that's
Yeah.
interesting. Yeah. It kind of reminds me of this person I met the other day. He's an instructor. It's nothing to do with language. He was just teaching me something else. But he had this received pronunciation accent, like David Attenborough. Have you heard of David Attenborough?
Yeah, of course.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Well, this instructor, he sounded exactly like him. And I was, and I was like, wow. And yeah, I was kind of jealous because even though I'm a native English speaker, when you hear a foreigner speak with the received pronunciation, you're like, oh wow, But it's definitely inspiring. So now we've talked about how you prepared. We talked about your experience on the online course, and we've talked about the exam day. Now, can you tell us? This is the finale. Can you tell us your IELTS results? And these are what you got first time, correct?
Yeah, quite right. So I have 7.5 for writing and listening, and 8 for speaking and reading.
Fantastic. Well done there. Well done, Lena. Those are excellent results.
Yeah, I'm very proud of myself as well.
Yeah, you should be. Absolutely. Absolutely. Nobody can take that away now. That's yours. And that's going to get you into university in Germany, correct? Is that right?
Yeah.
Excellent. Interesting. Have you decided which university you'll go to
No,
yet?
I have chosen 15, I believe. So probably some of them will choose me as well.
Wow, 15. Yeah, that's quite a lot. How about
And by the way, as far as the exam is concerned, I just want to add that the most difficult thing in the exam for me was to stay concentrated for such a long time, because when I prepared at home, I did separately several sections, or for instance reading, then I had a pause, did something else, and then did for instance listening. But in the exam you didn't have time to rest, and it was very stressful from this point of view, because I believe that I could have done better in reading and in listening, because when I did these tasks at home, I did them almost without any mistakes, but in the exam I was short of time, and that's why it didn't work so smoothly.
Interesting. Very interesting. What could you recommend? Like, if you could do the exam again, do you think you would start practicing doing the whole exam in like one session to get, without taking breaks? Like, so you're at home and just do the whole reading, the whole listening, and then the writing all together to get used to it. Do you think that would help you?
I think it would. It's worth doing it at least 2 or 3 times before the exam. For instance, I had for preparation 2 months, and you can do it one time in 3 weeks, for example. Yes, it's worth trying, because it's really very difficult to stay concentrated, especially if you are under pressure of this stress and of other people who are around you, and they all are writing things. it's stressful.
Yeah, I can totally understand. It just kind of goes back to what we briefly mentioned near the beginning, that it's not only the language exam, but you also need exam skills, and it's not just the ability to write in an academic way. It's not just the ability to upgrade your language for the speaking exam. It's also being familiar with the exam conditions, and not only being familiar, but being prepared and be ready to go through the listening, the reading, and the speaking, maybe the writing, all in one day, possibly all in one day. So it's just adding to those factors. So this is why I think what you did was very smart, i.e. allocating a good 2 months. And also, did you mention that before Christmas you was listening to lots of material in English just to get familiar?
Yes, actually, a friend of mine took this exam last year, and I asked her about the way she prepared for it. She didn't get my scores, but nevertheless, it was interesting, and she told me that 2 months were okay for it, and that's why I decided to start to have 2 months for it. But of course I try to in autumn and in winter I listened and to some podcasts, and I read some materials on the internet just to get acquainted with the exam.
I see. But your serious preparation, like your essay writing and getting feedback, and that started 2 months beforehand.
Yeah, quite right.
All right, perfect. Okay, so the final question now, or final 2 questions. The first one is, what would you say to somebody who's maybe considering joining the online course?
I would recommend it because it's very difficult to study by yourself, and if you choose this online course, you will work with people who have very much experience in the sphere, and they will help you to organize your time and your efforts in the most efficient way. And it's very easier to work in this way than to do it by yourself, especially if you have no idea how to prepare for such exams. And to be honest, if I would have failed the exam, for instance the writing part, I would turn to your writing help of your team, just to work with them, and maybe if I will
to continue with the writing team.
Yeah.
Gotcha, yeah. Okay.
Yes, and if I will have to pass this exam in future, I would like to use the help of your team because, well, they are specialists in the sphere, and it's always better to work with people who know what to do and who can share their experience with you.
Absolutely.
It's a great help.
Yeah, absolutely. And just for the listeners, we hire EX-IELTS examiners to review your essays. So that's for the essay correction service and for the essays submitted through the online course. So there's a great team there, and then there's the course that I developed with them to help students pass, which to get fast results and just to simplify the whole process. And so thank you very much, Lena. We'll come to an end. Is there anything else that you would like to add to the students? Anything else you'd like to say to the students just to help them?
Just the main advice is not to give up, because unfortunately sometimes we can't get the necessary results, at the necessary time. But it doesn't mean that we should give up. And if you try and continue working on your progress, you will succeed in the end. That's the main thing to remember.
Fantastic. Yeah, fantastic. And I strongly and wholeheartedly agree with what Lena's saying. And this month, I'm going to try and quit coffee again. I'm just going to be like... Yeah, eventually I will get there, but it's going to be like my fourth attempt. But yeah, the thing is, you're only a failure. You only fail if you quit trying. I think might sound a bit corny, a bit cheesy that, but it really is true, you know. And each time you're gonna get closer to your goal. Each time you try it, and each time you set the objective, you're gonna get closer. So yeah, well, I think that's everything. Thank you very much, Lena.
Thank you for your podcast and to your team as well.
Excellent. I'll pass those kind remarks on.
Thanks for listening to IELTSPodcast.com.